Welcome to this episode of the Senior Care Growth Show. My name is Winston, and I am super excited today to be joined by Jason McCloud. Jason is the Director of Digital Marketing for Benchmark Senior Living. He comes with just a wealth of experience from all facets of the senior care space. And Jason, we're just super excited to have you.
Thank you, Winston. Really appreciate the opportunity and look forward to the chat.
This episode of the Senior Care Growth Show is brought to you by SMASH, the Senior Care Marketing and Sales Summit, bringing together chief strategists from across the senior housing and post-acute continuum. There's nothing like it in senior care anywhere. For a limited time, Senior Care Growth listeners can save $400 on their SMASH registration. Visit www.seniorcaremarketingsummit.com and use code SCG400. That's SCG400. Just by way of introduction, maybe you could give folks a brief overview of what it is that you do and what you've been up to these days.
Sure, absolutely. So as you mentioned, I'm Director of Digital Marketing for Benchmark Senior Living. Prior to that, I've also worked on the owner-operator side at Brookdale Senior Living for a number of years, as well as Elmcroft Senior Living, as well as had some experience on the lead aggregator or referral partner side at caring.com. As well as the agency side at Sage Age Strategies. So I've seen a lot. I've got to experience a lot in my 10-year journey so far in the senior care industry, and really blessed to have done so.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you really do have a lot of experience from different angles of sales and marketing in the senior care space. Tell me, from your experience, what have you seen as best practices when it comes to generating leads or lead intake, as we might call it, for senior care communities? What kind of processes, best practices should people start thinking about?
Sure, absolutely, Winston. So lead intake is a huge opportunity that I think is not leveraged enough at the owner-operator side. Okay. I'd say, caring.com, A Place for Mom, right? The lead aggregators are very good with lead intake, processing leads, following up on leads, right? Be able to convert those from an inquiry to a tour to, a referral for the communities, as well as helping that move it, conversion ratio. So they're very good at what they do, but I think, the owner-operator side in the industry could do much better at looking at, how they're intaking leads, how they're processing leads, right? Very, very important. And I think, your organization just recently at the SMASH conference did a great survey. And I think some of those results came back with some really, not so surprising things, but, I think the number one, opportunity and need for the provider or owner operator side was more leads, right?
Right.
So we hear this all the time. I hear this all the time. I hear this not only at Benchmark, but, other friends throughout the industry as well, just talking about, well, if I just have more inquiries or more leads, and naturally I have more move-ins, right? That is somewhat relative, obviously, but it's not necessarily always the number one answer, right? So, providers I worked for in the past, I've been able to work with them to uncover, much like we're doing at Benchmark today, what are the hurdles that we have in terms of our lead intake, right? How are we intaking leads today? How are we processing leads today? How are we doing it most efficiently to impact our bottom line, right? Increase occupancy, right? Increase our ROI, on our marketing spend. And so I really believe that should be the number one opportunity that, providers, owner-operators should be looking at is lead intake. Capabilities, right? Systems and capabilities, as opposed to, well, we just need more leads. Because honestly, if you really look at the data, right? So we'll talk about those best practices in a moment, but if you really look at the data, I bet it's going to show you that you not maybe have more leads than you need, but you have more than you understand that you do have coming in, right? So talking about leads coming in from phone calls directly to your communities, do you know how many phone calls and lead opportunity you're getting there day to day, right? A lot of organizations that really don't know those numbers. So again, they think, well, if we just buy more leads, we'll get more higher qualified leads, we'll get more move-ins, higher occupancy rate. But again, it's somewhat relative, but I don't believe that's really the first way to look at it. I think you really need to look at the data, because if you're buying leads right now, right, let's say you're paying $100 cost per qualified lead, which is a pretty good price. Are you really buying it at $100 cost per lead in terms of, are you really getting that ROI when you start backing it out? Or is it really higher because there's a lot of leads that you are buying that we call falling on the floor, right? That you're not optimizing, that, you're not following up on, you're not getting proper contact information, you're not making multiple touch points. So you're not able to convert that inquiry into a lead and then to a tour, then to a move-in. So I think there's a lot of opportunity right now in the industry for owner operator providers to really look at lead intake processes to really impact their bottom line. And I think that would be their biggest opportunity to impact their bottom line right now, especially in such a competitive space that we're all in, right? So obviously there's a lot of market pressures, right? It's not just, new development and dollars coming in. It's not just maybe aging assets. It might not be just recruiting and retention issues. Those are all real things and are all impacting the bottom line, no doubt. But, how can you be competitive in today's marketplace where you really need to get very, very good, right, at lead generation, lead nurturing, and all that takes, good intake and a good lead generation pipeline.
Yeah. And so talking about lead intake, you mentioned a few different channels, but it sounds like it's more than just paying for more leads. There are other ways you can generate leads, and you need to start thinking about those different channels, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there's many ways, as we all know, to generate leads, right? It's not just online. It's not just, offline as well. It's feet on the street. It's looking at your ground game, your air game. There's so many different ways, right? We might start seeing a decline in areas like professional referrals, whether that's from, social workers or discharge planners. We might be seeing that, but there's still great opportunity, right? They still close at a pretty high rate. So we want to continue to make sure that we're doing our best to optimize that channel. But as we all know, 60% of inquiries now are coming from online, right? Yes, it's just one source. It might be a lower qualified source, but you have higher opportunity in terms of not only generating more qualified leads to more movements, but also at a lower cost, right? But to be able to do that and do that well, you really need to have a very efficient lead generation pipeline, right? And it really comes to intake and processing. And in terms of best practices, right, I would really look at it, your organization, take a step back and really look at three things, right? So number one is data, as I mentioned. You have to have the data. You have to know where your inquiries are coming from. How many inquiries of that 60% of online inquiries are coming in via phone? Where are those inquiries being routed to? Are they right to the front desk at the community? Are they able to take an inquiry? Are they able to advance a sale? Not only advance a sale, but just take proper contact information, consistency? Probably not. I can't tell you how many times I've listened to hundreds, if not thousands, literally, of calls, how they're being handled at the community level, and sometimes at different levels. It can even be regional, or it can even be at a call center. But how are they handling the intake of that call, right? And we do know that you're going to get 2-to-1 phone call leads over form submissions, right? But are we tracking that? Do we have the data? Do we know where the leads are coming from? Do we know how we're processing that lead? And are we doing the best of our ability to process that lead efficiently? And I would just say, I'd be so bold to say that majority of providers, owner operators that I know aren't necessarily doing this and doing it well. It just takes a few mystery shops, or, whether it's Caring.com or Place for Mom you're working with, they do mystery shops. They'll show you those results, and pretty quickly you can start seeing, right, your follow-up times, how quickly you're following up, right? I mean, that speed to lead, that follow-up, and we'll talk about that more detail in a bit, but how that impacts your closing ratios. So it's really important to have that data, number one, right? Number two, it's really about integration, right? Are your systems integrated, right? Is your MarTech stack integrated? What I mean by that is your CRM integrated with either a call center, or is it integrated with your inbound and outbound marketing platforms? Because if it's not integrated, or with your referral partners, then you're not able to get that inquiry real time, right? You're not able to make sure that you can funnel that to the correct person to follow up as quick as possible, but also make sure you have consistent and constant contact information, right? As you start taking them through the buyer's journey, right? From a marketing standpoint, it's all about how many touches, how many engagement points can you make with that consumer, that prospect, right, to advance the sale. We all know the more engagement you have and the more time you spend with the prospect and develop that trusted relationship, the better chance you have to, convert them, right? It's not rocket science, but what are your systems integrated to be able to do that, to be able to help augment what you're doing offline with your sales teams in all these touches. So I would say data, number one. Number two would be integration with systems. And then number three, call center capabilities. So I know, working, in the space for, a number of years, I know that in the last 5 years or so, more and more provider owner operators are getting comfortable with call centers. I know there's still many in the space that are uncomfortable with call centers. There's a negative connotation, I think, with some providers out there that have used call centers before in the past that are really just glorified, can be glorified answering services, right? So they're, not very empathetic. They're very scripted. Obviously that's going to potentially have a more negative effect on consumer engagement than it would be to be continuing to route these calls directly to your communities. But I would say that, having a call center, whether that's in-house, which we do at Benchmark, and we've seen great success with that because they're truly an extension of our sales teams. And that's, get back to that point, how critical that is. But even if you're working with a third-party vendor, it's really important that you're working with them to make sure that calls aren't scripted, that they're trained to be empathetic, that they know everything there is to know about your community. It's very important they can speak to the community. What makes that community wonderful and different from other communities. They need to be able to answer just about every question that your sales folks at the community be able to answer. Because if they can't, then it's going to be, you immediately start, getting cracks, within that relationship of that consumer, right? Or that prospect who, expects you to know, the product and service that you're offering, right? They expect to know about this community that they're inquiring about. And it can make that handoff a little bit rough if they are not experienced enough at that first touch level. So it's really important for, a call center to be successful. Again, whether that's in-house or with a third-party vendor, that they really become an extension of your sales team, that, again, they really know how to talk to prospects. They really know how to build that level of trust and really be able to advance the sale, right? It's really important that, you really start looking at how many touches and how you can advance the sale of your inquiries before they get to the community level, before they get to a sales and marketing director, because those folks really should be spending their time in the selling zone. I'm a big proponent of David Smith's, selling methodology, the Sherpa model. It's all about prospect-centered selling. I do believe that. How much time can you really spend with them? But, if you don't have a really efficient pipeline in place and you're just dumping all the inquiries, right, at the community level, good luck. It's not going to work for you. You might think more is more, but no, more is worse, right? You'll start driving more inquiries and start seeing your conversion rate going down because your sales folks just can't handle that volume. They shouldn't be spending their time trying to weed through the haystack to try to find those qualified inquiries, right? They should really be spending their time focused on selling. And selling should really mean, spending time with prospects, developing that relationship, building that level of trust, taking them on tours, offering them, opportunities to come into the community, as well as offering the opportunity to come to their home, doing a home visit and learning more about them and their family and their needs. So that's really where the attention, I believe, of the sales folks today should be spent, more in that selling zone than, trying to qualify or quantify, leads that are coming through, whether that's online or offline.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. So you mentioned a couple things, the data and integrations, call center capability. It sounds like in order to have sales folks focus on more qualified leads, you need to build out those systems in order to deliver the qualified leads to them. So it's obviously about lead intake and getting the number of leads in, but what are some things that marketing folks can do or systems can do to help to identify those qualified leads to get them to the sales folks?
Absolutely. Great question. So you definitely need to build out the infrastructure, right? So thinking about the buyer's journey, the prospect's journey as a sales funnel. Well, you need to look at and think about your lead intake and pipeline just like a lead funnel, right? So, you could dump a bunch of volume in the top, but how are you able to process that volume, right? So it's not just having bodies and people, right, answering phones or, sending emails or following up via phone. It's really about the systems that you have in place. So obviously you definitely need, people but then you also need integrated systems, right? You need to use things like lead scoring. You need to start using techniques like, last in, first out, right? So, if we're talking about speed to lead, and again, we'll talk a little bit about that in a moment of what that entails, but you really got to get smart at how you're triaging your incoming inquiry flow, right? What are the inquiries that you know? And it could even be by source. So if you don't have the budget to have an internal or external call center, there's a lot of things you can do with your regional teams, with still your community teams, depending on your community's made up. If you have a sales and marketing director and they also have a marketing coordinator, you could utilize their time a little bit. But, you can still look at the resources you have and still build, right, an efficient lead pipeline, or as efficient as you can, but using techniques and using technology to do things like lead score, and to be using pieces of data that's going to tell your teams which leads they should be following up on, how quickly and when and from which sources, be able to prioritize that for you. Because if you're just trying to catch everything you possibly can, again, at the community level, and it's just everything's coming in inbound, you're really not going to be able to process that efficiently and effectively. And really, it's going to be more detrimental, I think, to your conversion rate, to your bottom line, doing it that way.
Gotcha. Yeah, that sounds great. So really, in order to drive those more qualified leads, to get them in for a tour, got to use things like lead scoring, triage the leads that are coming in, get them to the sales folks. And then from the sales standpoint, though, we know that the tour to move-in period is really, really important.
Absolutely.
What can organizations do to close more leads who come in for tours? What's your advice there?
Yeah, great question, Winston. So as we all know in the industry, the number is about 40%, right? So you have a 40% greater chance to convert them to a move-in if you get them in for a tour, right? So tours are gold, and they really are. But it takes a lot to get that tour. And I think, again, when we're talking about that pipeline and efficiency, it's really important to look at how you're getting to that point with prospects. But from the point of tour to close, it's really important in terms of, again, time in the selling zone. How much time are you able to dedicate to that prospect, once they take that tour and beyond? How many touches, how many more meaningful engagement points can you make with that prospect, right? It doesn't stop at a tour, right? It doesn't stop at qualification. It goes all the way through to the sale. And good sales folks know this, but also good sales folks, I believe, in the industry, again, can be overburdened by, trying to intake, inquiries from all different levels of the funnel, as opposed to really being able to focus to spend, that quality, dedicated, prospect-centered selling time with, whether it be Mary Smith or Tom Smith, right, to get them from that tour all the way through to close. And that's huge. And I think we've seen success with that at Benchmark, right? The more that we can take in terms of funneling away from the sales staff, in terms of the initial engagement, right? The more they can spend time on the prospect themselves and build that trusted relationship, as well as being able to increase overall conversion rates by, again, allowing them to do their job while we're doing our job from the marketing and sales standpoint at the top end of the funnel to create more efficiencies.
Gotcha. Yeah. So, to me, that really speaks to the need for aligned marketing and sales teams. Is that something that you've seen in your experience, that the importance of kind of combining those two teams or getting them on the same page?
I do, Winston. And interesting enough, I think, which may be still, I think, a quirk in the industry, is that, the industry has always kind of looked at sales and marketing bucketed together. I kind of see it as, well, from an operations standpoint, it's great for your bottom line if, you have a sales and marketing director rather than a sales director and a marketing director, all the way up to the corporate level. I think that has something to do with it. But I think more and more organizations, and we're seeing this, right, are dedicating, resources and budget to having dedicated marketing skill set and expertise, as opposed to just having it lumped together, right? So I think it's best for organizations if they have dedicated marketing expertise and dedicated sales expertise, right? They're two different functions, right? Two different skill sets, but absolutely those two need to work together, hand in glove, attached at the hip. It's very important. If you're disjointed in any way, those two teams, it's really not going to work. You're not going to have this efficient lead flow. You're not going to be able to efficiently be able to meet all those touch points, right?
Yep.
Whether that's through offline marketing, online marketing, so on and so forth, whether it's through your call center, through your regional teams as well as your community teams. You're not going to be able to work together to be able to make sure that consistently, you're all trying to hit on all those touch points all the way through the funnel effectively. If you're disjointed, if you're not, it's just, you're going to be burning a lot of time. You're going to be throwing everything else against the wall. You're going to be hoping that marketing is doing marketing and sales is doing sales. And at the end of the day, you might have, sales saying, hey, we just need more leads. And then marketing just saying, hey, well, you need to close, the leads we are giving you. And, we know that argument in the industry, right? That back and forth. And, again, then that can be unhealthy, right? Unhealthy for your organization. So I really think, we really need to understand as an industry that it is two different skill sets, marketing versus sales, but both need to work hand in glove together to really be successful, especially in this very competitive marketplace that we're in.
Yeah, so you make that sound easy, getting marketing and sales on the same page. What are some of the challenges you've seen with kind of bridging the gap between marketing and sales, and what advice would you have for folks trying to get those two teams aligned?
Well, just, first and foremost, communication, right? I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Are you communicating? Do you have ongoing, interdepartment meetings? I know at Benchmark, we have a great system of communication. We work hand in glove with our sales teams. We're literally in the room with them every week. So we have our sales and marketing meetings, right? And if there's anything that needs to go beyond that, then we'll have an offsite or we'll work directly with the sales teams in the field. So it's really important that you have those relationships. You almost have to think of yourself as one department, even though you have two separate, functions, goals, but you really have to function as one team. So communication, number one. And then I think number two is education, right? So even though we're both relying, maybe both departments are relying on each other to do their job, and to do it well, each side needs to be educated what the other side brings to the table, right? What they're doing, why they're doing, what's the strategy, what's the tactics, right? And what are the success measurements and goals, right? On each side, are those aligned? Are they aligned? Really importantly, that each side is not only communicating, but educating each side with what they need, what they're hearing, so on and so forth, what's working, what's not working, right? So you can quickly optimize and continue to move forward to be successful.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think on that education side, it goes back to building that lead intake funnel and the processes, making sure that you've got the data and the integrations. For me, the integration piece of this is huge, where if you've got the marketing side and the sales side, those two systems at least talking to each other, you get good data throughout that system. Have you found that to be true in your experience, and what tips would you have for folks?
Yeah, absolutely. So as we all know, though, with CRMs, right, the data is only as good as it is inputted, right? So it's really important. And I think, again, critical that sales and marketing is working together, because marketing is really relying on that data, knowing that it's not 100% pure, but it's the best data that marketing has, right, to make key decisions of where they're going to spend their marketing dollars, right? Again, whether that's offline or online, and what channels and what tactics, what's working and what's not working. And really, you can only look at data, right? But again, that data a lot of times is generated, right, and owned and managed by the sales team. So it's really important that sales teams, I understand, sales and marketing directors at the community level are just overwhelmed, right? By and large in the industry right now, they're overwhelmed with, I got to spend time outside the building, whether that's 60-70% of the time developing professional referrals. I need to be doing tours. I need to be, entering, data into CRM. I need to be following up on internet leads, all these things that they're tasked to do, sometimes even beyond that. They'll be serving meals and helping move, new residents in, and I've seen it all, and really it's to not only their detriment, but also the detriment of the organization, that community in the organization. It's really going to impede them from having the success that, they really would have if they really, again, would look at how they're intaking opportunity, how they're processing that, the time where the time is spent with the sales folks, how they're focused on, again, spending more time in the selling zone rather than, doing all the, wearing all these different hats. So, really, really important there. that they really be able to focus, but that your team, your organization, again, from a marketing standpoint and a sales standpoint, are working together and giving the resources and capabilities to your communities, to your team, so they can be successful.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff all comes kind of full circle. It's the investment in the data, the integrations, and it's taking the time to do those things and analyze your intake and your processes so that you can free up time ongoing for the sales folks to focus on the right leads. And then they'll have time to input those notes into the CRM, or maybe more time to at least give good data back to the marketing folks. So lots of different moving pieces here, but what would you say would be first steps for maybe someone in a marketing position or someone who's in charge of marketing and sales for an organization to clean up their processes, clean up their lead intake? Where should they start with all this?
Sure, great question. Well, it sounds bigger than I think it really is. Okay. I think, the biggest challenge I see, and I'm going to go to the challenge first and then try to address your question. But, yep. One of the biggest challenges I see is that, lack of knowledge and expertise on the owner, operator, provider side with not only marketing, but innovation and change within sales strategy and tactics, right? So, the things that we're talking about here, and that's why I love these opportunities to be able to talk to you in the industry about, all the opportunity that there is in the industry, and really where, there's, the bar is, I believe, set not that high for most of your competitors. And I think that, is a great area of opportunity. And I think the barrier of entry to some of these things is pretty low. Although if you don't have the experience, again, you listen to this podcast and you think, wow, yeah, that's great. But, I don't have the time, money, resources, and effort to be able to deploy something like that. Which really, if you had the knowledge and expertise, it's not, as tough as it really sounds, right? But where I would start is, again, I would start back, and looking at the data, where are your biggest areas of opportunity, right? I think if you would ask, majority of whether it's marketing folks or sales and marketing folks, not just, where's, the volume of your inquiries coming from. I think they can easily say, well, internet 60%, 40% offline, or, they could break it up, right? But really beyond that, okay, so where are qualified inquiries coming from, right? Not only that, but what are the tactics? What are the marketing strategies and tactics that are driving those qualified inquiries? And then how are you actually taking a qualified inquiry and converting that to a tour and then to a move-in most effective, right?
Right.
So figure that out first. And then once you figure out that sort of secret sauce, what's working for your communities, your teams today, then double down on that. That would be number one. Double down on that. Then I would say look back at integration. Are you integrated? Are there areas where you could be integrated more to make you more efficient? And making sure that you do that, right? So you're not losing data, that you're able to capture data real time, that you're able to be consistent with the data that you have. Again, not just so you can follow up properly, right, with prospects, but also that you can continue to follow up with them and that you can continue to build that profile, right? So you continue to engage them throughout the entire buyer's journey. And again, it's really important that data is accurate. And then besides integration, again, back to call center capability, you can't do it all. Sales and marketing folks at the community level cannot be wearing all the hats that a lot of them are wearing today. I know there's many providers like Benchmark that are being innovative in the space, that are looking at, call center capabilities in-house or external. They're looking at multiple levels of call centers, or a two-tiered system, a lot like lead aggregators are using, like PlaceForMom and Caring.com, right? It's really how can you process volume, right, and get that meaningful volume down to those, I would say very qualified tours, what we used to call hot leads, to then, those golden tours, right?
Yeah.
That we all want so bad, but we want to make sure that when we get those tours, and that high converting opportunity, that our sales folks are laser focused on that, able to convert that at a very high level.
Gotcha. Yeah, I love that. So look for successes, learn from them, amplify and repeat those successes, and invest in what's working. build systems for volume and look at integrations that might help you save time and get better data. And then you can free up the sales team to focus on what really matters. And that's those qualified leads and helping to move from a tour to closed. That's
right. That's right in a nutshell. I couldn't say it any better.
I love that. Well, I'll try to recap all this. We've talked about so many big ideas, but I think a lot of this stuff, to your point, is really not as hard as it sounds. I mean, just let's take those steps. Let's look at what we've done, what's been successful. Let's build on it, and let's take a look at how we can build some systems to handle that lead volume. I think that's all great advice. Any other thoughts for the audience today who's been listening to this podcast, who's ready to get going? Any other final thoughts or takeaways?
Sure. I would really just say, start small, take it one step at a time. Again, it might sound like, it can be very involved. It can be very technical, right? When you start really getting into the minutia, you really start getting into the weeds of, integration, right? Or how systems are connected and, where does that lead go first, to which database first and then to the next database, and what are the event and time triggers, and what are then the pieces of content and how personalized that content. And it can sound very overwhelming, and it can be, but start small. There's so many areas of opportunity. I think in terms of, again, collecting data, getting systems in place to be able to collect, aggregate that data on a regular ongoing basis, right? As well as, again, looking at, integration with your systems, looking at test piloting a call center, whether that's with a few of your communities, whether that's in-house with a few of your sales folks or regional teams, or maybe externally looking at some vendors out there, some great vendors out there that do a great job of, really getting to know your communities, really working with you as an extension of your sales team. So I think they can be invaluable. But then also just, again, starting small, start, with one or two of these things. I think one of the other, in terms of methodologies would be speed to lead, right? Look at, again, how quickly are you following up on an inquiry, right? That will say everything, right? So that will tell you where your opportunity loss is. If you're not following up on every inquiry within 5 minutes, then you're not meeting sales and marketing standards of, obviously not our industry yet. It will be, someday, hopefully soon, but other industries, right? So we know that, if you cannot contact somebody within 5 minutes, then you have 100 times less chance to contact them, meaning the contact ratio just starts dropping, right? And why is that? It's because we're all so busy, we get phone calls, honestly, my wife just walked in the door and, I can get distracted here. Or, oh, honey, did you take care of this or do that? And so, literally from, not even 1 minute to the next, it's literally seconds, right? To the next that we're distracted by an email or a phone call or another conversation, right? Where we get sidetracked and we're programmed, right? To want to be engaged, right? If I engage with you, I'm giving you permission then to engage with me. And really, when I put the ball in your court, I put the onus on you to do your job of coming back to me. I'm not going to come back to you. I give you one opportunity, right, to come to me and meet me on my terms, right? And to be able to do that, you need to be very good at how quickly you can re-engage with that person to continue that conversation, start building that level of trust. And start building that sales journey, right? So really, really important stuff. So really, there's that. And we also know that if you wait an hour or more, then your chance to convert that inquiry to a lead, to a qualified tour drops 50%.
Yeah.
Huge, right? So I know there's many organizations out there right now. I actually did a speed to lead session at Smash probably 3 years ago, I think the first year of Smash. And I can't tell you how many sales and marketing directors in the room, when I said you had to respond to every inquiry, at that time I said within 15 minutes, their faces were like, how can I do it? Impossible. Like he's asking the impossible. Not only that, but then I also got a lot of pushback where, I don't want to, pester or bother them, because persistence is key too, right? So it's not just how quickly I can follow up with you, but then it's persistent. How many touch points? So even if I have a voice-to-voice conversation with you, I need to be able to follow that up with an email communication or text communication or another form of communication as quickly as I can, right?
Yep.
We all know that it takes at least 5 touch points, right, with your service, your product, service, or brand before someone's willing to make the next step within the sales journey. So how many steps can I get, right? How many touch points or, through those steps, how many touch points can I get to advance that conversation and that sale, right? So really important that you're looking at, how quickly you're following up on leads. But then once you get that down, it's really how are you following up, and then who's following up on inquiries, right? And then how are you getting those through your system, and what are those other touch points throughout the sales funnel?
Yeah, and I think you touched on some really great points there too. The speed to lead is just so critical. And actually, as I was preparing for Smash last year, I did a bit of a test, and I did an anonymous test. I reached out to different communities within the area. I'll leave their names out to protect the guilty, but there were the response time was amazing. Some were right on point, and they got back to me instantly. Others I didn't hear back from at all. And I mean, I think that the person that's looking at different communities now is not going to wait around for you to call. They're going to move on to the next one. Yeah,
that's right. They're gone to the next, and it's so competitive now. Where I might be sounding a little doom and gloom about the industry as a whole, but the industry is investing. They are getting smarter. You have competitors like Brookdale out there and others that not only have in-house but external call centers, right? And really, obviously, you're competing with the aggregators too. Carrying.com, Place for Mom. I mean, we're all relying on them. I think it's a great partnership. You should be working with them. I believe should have a holistic approach to lead generation. But at the same time, there is competition there, right? And so that if you don't follow up with somebody timely, then you're going to lose that opportunity. You're never going to get a chance to have that conversation. And as much as sales and marketing director would say, "Oh, I can't believe that, you're really asking me to follow up within 5 minutes or 15 minutes. How can I do that?" The number one, answer is no, they shouldn't be. You should have, call center and a triage and a pipeline to handle that, right? They shouldn't be the ones focused on that. But, even if they are, and they're overwhelmed by it, or they don't even necessarily believe in those numbers, then you ask them, okay, well, how many times have you talked with a prospect, particularly an internet lead, right? You've talked with them, whether that's 5 minutes or an hour or 5 hours or 12 hours later, the further you get from that, right, that initial touch point, they say, "I don't know how you got my information. Stop calling me."
Yeah, right.
Really what that is just they're already overwhelmed because your competitors are calling them. A Place for Mom, Carrier.com, chances are I've spread it out to 3, 4, 5, 6 of your competitors. They're getting barraged by calls within an hour. I believe within an hour, if you don't call, obviously not with, definitely within 5 minutes. Sometimes you have to be even quicker than that. But outside of an hour, good luck having that conversation because the prospect in today's environment is just totally overwhelmed with contact by that point. And it's unfortunate. I think it's a disservice to the prospect and the consumer. But at the same time, those are the rules of the game. So, if you want to play the game, unfortunately, you have to play by the rules.
Right. Yep. Yeah, that's a great point. So I think speed to lead is an easy one people can tackle. And then I think you've covered so many good areas where folks can take a look at how their systems are working or not and how they can sort of clean up those processes to free up some time for the sales team to focus on what's important. I'm going to be really curious after we publish this podcast what questions we get because I think that people are going to listen to this and have specific questions for you given your experience and all that you've covered. So if you do have questions, please let us know. And hopefully, Jason, we can have you back on the podcast sometime soon to address those.
Absolutely. Thank you, Winston. Again, appreciate the opportunity. I would love to address any questions that come through. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
Once again, I'd like to thank Jason McCloud for being on the show. Visit our website at www.seniorcaregrowth.com for more podcast episodes and other helpful resources, including our State of Senior Care Sales and Marketing Report. Thanks again for listening to the Senior Care Growth Show, where senior care sales and marketing professionals come to grow. My name is Winston, and I'll see you next time.